Hello, everybody. This is Chris Schmidt, and welcome to another episode of Rocket Lasso Live. I think this is episode 16. We've done 16 of these in a row. Now, next week I'm going to be on vacation, so there won't be an episode there, but episode 17 will be the week after that. In any case, we've got the chat up, and we are ready to rock. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here. And let's go into the chat and check what our links are. Thanks for getting those links together, Crossfader. But let's see, we've got a question from Leo. I need to make these mazes of dice easier. Most of what was done here was manually and brute force. Looking for a better motion graphics solution, how would I tackle it? 8 seconds into this link. So let's see what we got here. Pops open Twitter for me. So this is from your own thing. I remember actually seeing this a little bit earlier. But you're saying 8 seconds in, you're looking for the dice maze. So that was 8 seconds in. You're saying there's a dice maze back there, so you've just got this big layout. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. Most of it was done manually. You need a better MoGraph solution. Now, it's not actually a maze, right? Oh, okay. Oh, we're going down more. Leo says there's a little bit more going on. So we're down here. We got this big pile. Whee! So it just seems like you're looking at this big pile of dice down on the ground. You're looking for a way of distributing that, and you're saying you kind of did a big brute force method. Let me think. What would I do? I mean, it doesn't even look like, you say the word maze, but it just seems like a big pile. It just seems like they're piled all over the place, because there's a big difference between a maze, where it's like, oh, there's supposed to be a path through, and the camera would be following through, and it's trying to find a path through the maze. There's that, and then there's, hey, it's just a big scattering of dice all over the place. So the difference between that is the important thing for the question. I'm not going to go and make a big full proper die. I do have a model I made of a 6-sided die a while ago. Actually, it would be kind of nice to find that, because then we could actually be talking about something real here. Let me see if I can find it on the computer. I'm not sure I can. But if I can, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'm highly doubting I've got the model on this computer. I made that a long time ago. So I'm looking for that, Leo. If you have... is it supposed to be like a maze where something could be traveling through it, like it's, like you would put, mice in a scientist's maze type of thing? Or are you just looking at a big scattering of dice all over the place? I don't have the dice. I just have the picture of the dice. So, sadly, this is the picture I have. So I modeled this die, but I don't have the model on me. But we don't really need the model. All the piles are part of the maze. Okay, well... Along those lines, then, I would just make make this die, make it something very uniform, like 100, 100, 100, or whatever the scale is. That's just something to keep it clean. We'll do a 1 subdivision fillet on there just to get a little bit of rounding. Yeah, let's do 2. As we get a little bit of rounding on our cube. And then, honestly, I think the way I would go about doing it would be, let's see, what kind of grid size we want. Let's do 50 by 50, which is a lot, and then... So it would be 100 times 50, so it's 5,000. 5,000 by 5,000. And then we should have a giant grid of 100 by 100 if we want everything to be perfectly touching each other. So we can go ahead and, does that make sense? Divide that into 50? I think that does. It might not, actually. We might need an extra segment on there. Let's go ahead and just clone onto the surface. So I'm going to clone it to an object. The object is going to be the plane. It's cloning its surface, but I'm going to say I want to go into polygon center. And I just want to make sure that these are actually indeed lining up and not being too big. Yep, okay, it is perfect layout. I wasn't 100% sure it would be. So we got this nice, super clean layout. We have good control over this, and we are, I think because we're just doing a little bit of rotation, we could definitely turn on a multi-instance situation, so that this is going to run incredibly fast. But in any case, we don't actually need that cloning yet. I would just make this editable, and you're saying you did a very brute force method, but if I was building a maze, then I could start we could start drawing a path through here just with our selection tool. So I could just grab this. If you click your middle mouse button and drag left and right, you can make it bigger and smaller. So make it really tiny. And we could start just drawing a path through here. I'm going to be kind of sloppy with it. I'm being real sloppy with it. Let's go a little cleaner. So yeah, I'd start building out. Oh my goodness. I'd start making selections and just slowly building this out and drawing a trail. So this would be very manual. I don't know if I'd call this brute force, but that axis is getting in my way. I hit Alt, what is it, Alt D? Yeah, Alt D is a shortcut to hide your axis because it just kept on jumping in my way there. So yeah, spending a little bit of time and tracing out a maze. It's a little bit zen. It's a little bit relaxing just to go and start drawing something like this out. And what this does is it starts becoming the entire selection. It's very clean to be able to do that. Now, technically, you're going to want all of your die to be in the opposite position. So it's going to be, you could invert it really easily by just inverting it, hitting UI. Something that might be kind of fun is, why don't we make a selection tag? You make a selection tag here, and with the selection tag, it is now storing all of those polygons. But if I make a second selection tag, I could say use fields, and now in the second one, I'm going to drag in the first one, and if we go and create an invert, then this should be essentially a parametric instance. If I double click on it, it should be, well, let's see. How is that transferring? I think when I drag it over, this is transferring to nearest. I'm going to say index. So now if I double click on it, oh dear. Oh, interesting. That selection is still there. Oh, okay. My understanding of that was not as clear as I thought it was. You see how this is doing a pretty sloppy selection? That's doing nearest. Deformed points? No. Cache update. I thought if I set that to index, it had to like literally be the exact same selection, but it's not. So yeah, I just learned something there. All right, well, so much for that parametric one. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. So yeah, we've got our original one. We can invert it UI, and that becomes our selection. I can say select, and it's just as easy to trace out the maze from that one, just erasing out. But I did like the idea of inverting it, so that's too bad. So we get the maze. We can constantly override it and set that selection. And now if we go and clone, we're cloning everywhere, but I can tell it to don't clone. Well, clone onto the selection, which will mean don't clone onto those. We would visually hide that original plane and then make another floor on the ground, which is going to be minus 50, minus 25 actually, and make it 5,000 by 5,000, and yep, minus 25, and make sure I'm on object mode, so action goes down, hit apply. Come on, minus 25. Apply. There we go. I guess it did have to be minus 50. I wasn't sure, but yeah, minus 50. Yeah, I was thinking of a sphere. So yeah, then that clones, and now you've got all those erased out. So that's not very brute force. Now, there's a good chance you would want those all randomly rotated to have a different die face going on there. I don't think that's probably that difficult. I'm not sure. I'm going to go ahead and just I'm going to turn off the fill just so we can make a selection really easily here. Let's go ahead and I'm going to make a copy of that cube, and let's make this one editable. Turn off the cloner for a moment, and let's apply a couple of different colors here just so we can see. Let's see. Let's do a base color, and then I'm going to do a selection. Make a new material, apply it to that selection. Make another new material, apply it to that selection. Another new material applied to that selection. You see, every time I drag it directly into a polygon, it's creating a new selection tag. And get the bottom. Cool, and now we've done that. Now we can go ahead and get a different color on each of these. So we'll do an orange one, green one, a blue one, red one, and a pink one. And the colors are fun, so let's go and make a bright yellow. All right, so everything should be a different color. So now we can easily tell that these are all going to be cloning and being different colors. So now you can see they're all blue, but that's no good. We don't want them all to be blue. So I think what we would do is, well, step could work, but this seems like a really good use for formula. But even that, I think we've got other options now. Let me think of. There's a lot of approaches here. I can think of several different ways of controlling exactly how these are rotated. But one would be we could go to the formula. I gotta. I think I want to do it differently. Let's do a random. Does that random even make sense? I think we want to do a plane deformer. I'm going to make this up as I go, but we're going to do a plane deformer. Let's turn on rotation, and I want them to be able to randomly rotate. Now, it can rotate, let's see, it can rotate 4 times, so that's going to be 4 times 90, so 360. I guess that makes sense. So it can rotate up to 360, and let's see, am I spinning the correct direction? Yeah, any one of them is fine. Now, we might not actually want 360. It might be 270. But let's start out that way. So now we're saying it can rotate 360, but they're all rotating 360. So instead, I'm going to go and make a random noise. So let's go ahead and make a random field. And now you see this field is randomly spinning them all around. So that's cool. I like them all being spun. We got our random. It's completely applying maximum randomness to it. But we could go and actually maximum randomness is probably good. And then if this is going, we can tell this go forward as well as backward. I'm not sure if we want to do that. I'll keep that in mind though. But right now we're just randomly saying it can go forward up to 360, the power it's applying. So I think if we go to this drop down and I say quantize, there we go, is now quantizing to 4 steps. It's taking this random field, whatever it's feeding through, and it's saying, okay, but all those in between numbers, don't do that. Just go to these even increments. This, quantize is just like posterize. So we're posterizing those values. So now these have all randomly rotated on a single axis to this random amount. So we get all these different colors. Pretty cool. And that just worked out well. I guessed the numbers correctly. We can always go to our random field, and we can click on different seeds, and that should give us completely different layouts of the way these look. You see it's incredibly fast. And we should have our 4 different colors. And now we need to randomly rotate in the other orientation. So let's go ahead and create a second plane effector. And the second plane effector, it would probably be a good idea to name this one plane rot H. And now this one, let's make sure we apply it. And now this one should not be H. Let's do just 90 degrees. That's spinning that way. I guess that might be valid. That might be the one you want. Let's try that one. Yeah, so that's going to spin them all. And that's interesting because it's spinning them more locally. That's interesting. So I'm not sure which one of those we want. But let's try 360 here. And we're getting a lot of the blue up there, so I'm thinking something's not quite lining up correctly. The fall off should be based off the second one. I think the transform is based on the node, and I want it to be based off the effector. And are we still, yeah, we're still quantizing. And let's make sure we give it a different random seed. That might create some uniformity if they're both have the same seed. Can't help but feel, I mean, is that truly random? Feels like it is, but I'm not 100% certain that we're potentially getting every single color. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I feel like there's a lot of orange there, but then if I look at pink, I feel like, oh, there's a decent amount of pink. Green is very spread out. I do feel like there's certain emergent patterns. It's hard to tell for sure. Now, it could be that I'm rotating too far on one of these, or maybe it wasn't supposed to be 360, but it's supposed to be 270, and then we're only supposed to quantize to 2 levels, and then we're going to get some slightly different patterns. I'm not 100% on that. Let's just hit undo and assume that that's randomized, but now we should be seeing each face, and we could put a third one here if we wanted another orientation. But now we have all of our die randomly rotated to all those different orientations. And it's still set up in that pretty parametric setup. So we could always hide our, this one could be hidden. Oh, that's the ground. Hide that one. Unhide our plane. Actually, the ground is below the plane, so we shouldn't need to hide that one. And yeah, and now, at any point you can go and like, start erasing out additional directions here. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with drawing mazes. I drew so many mazes when I was young. It's really fun. But yeah, you can just go and keep on updating that. Just make sure you hit set selection to override the current selection. And then as soon as we unhide our cloner, we should see it's automatically updated with that new path. So that's working just fine. And then when it comes to, you're saying you're also randomly creating those stacks. So I think some of it would turn into let's see, if you wanted those random piles around there, so you weren't going to be having to like really manually place all those, I'm thinking that we would create a couple of random piles. So let's grab here's our die, die. Let's copy and paste that, and based on this die, why don't we go ahead and make a cloner? I'm going to put that into the cloner, and I'm going to clone up exactly 50 units, and I'm going to say that this could be, I don't know, a minimum, let's even say a minimum of 1. It can be a minimum of 1 tall, and I'm going to copy and paste that cloner. I'm going to say this one can go up to, I don't know, 11. So now we have a stack of 11. We probably want to apply both of those random effectors on there just to randomly rotate them. So now we should have those random stacks. So now you should see that we have one stack of 11 and one stack of 1. This one seems to be intersecting itself, so I guess the height was actually supposed to be 100. And this one has to be 100. And now we're going to put these into another cloner. So both of those get put into a cloner. And then this is going to be set to blend mode. So it's going to blend between those. So now what I'm thinking is we want to randomly clone onto certain polygons. So how would I do that? Well, we could turn certain ones off. A technique I've been using a lot. In fact, I used this in my new tutorial. Let's hide this. And I want to see this path, so I'm going to, let's apply a basic material. No, just one of them. Just the red material, and then we'll apply the yellow, and the yellow will be limited just so we can visually see where the map is. So we want these to be able to randomly appear on any one of the squares that isn't part of the maze. Now, we don't want it everywhere, so what I'm thinking is let's go ahead and make a matrix object, and I'm going to tell the matrix object to clone onto an object. The object will be the plane, or yeah, it will be the plane. We will limit it to the selection, so now it can only go to places where that is, and now you can see we got little clone, little clone, little clone. They're all over the place, and yeah, they're really tiny, but I'm going to say go ahead and clone onto the polygon center, so you can see that they're everywhere. So literally every single one of these has one, but we don't want it on all of them. So now we can go and limit that by going to, let's add a plane effector to that. So I'm going to say plane effector, and what this plane effector is going to do is not going to move it, but it is going to affect the, I think visibility is what we want. So let's say we're affecting the visibility, and now let's add in, I'm guessing just another random. So now that I've added in a new random field here, you see some of these have disappeared. There's only some around. But if we remap this now, if we go into remapping, I can go to our contour. I have a couple of things we can do here. We can start increasing our minimum, or we can start decreasing our maximum. You can see as I decrease my maximum, we're making it so that fewer of these can be controlled. Fewer of them are being created around. And that's working pretty well, actually. And yeah, so those all become, so it's like those other ones don't even exist anymore. We turned off their visibility. So that means that we've got this new matrix object that is being controlled by this plane effector. So now if I tell this cloner to clone onto an object, and the object is going to be that matrix we just set up, then now we've created these control points where those can get cloned onto. Now the rotation isn't quite correct. So in this matrix object, I'm going to make sure to tell it to rotate whatever the correct direction is. Here, it's -90 here. I never know what it is, I just guess, but now you can see I've got -90, which is copying all over the place there. Now these are starting on the ground, so something else I could do with our matrix is I could also say that I want this to be 100 units up. Nope, it's not on that axis. It's probably on Z, 100. Yeah, so now they're 100 units up, so these should look like they're stacked on other boxes. So with those stacked vertically, like that, now they're all kind of like this uniform height. and I don't want, well, they're transitional height. I don't want that. So now with our cloner, I can say, let's see, how do we do this? I think we did this last week, and I stumbled over it a little bit because it behaved slightly strangely. But let's go ahead and add in a new plane effector. Man, do you know that originally Mograph did not have any plane effectors? Or they were like, why would anybody need a plane effector? And now it's all we use. If you want to do a plane effector, you'd have to use, we used to have to use like a shader effector with nothing fed in, or a white color fed in, or you could possibly use a random effector with zero randomness. But yeah, it used to be weird. So I'm just going to organize this a little bit more so I don't confuse these. And what rotation do we use here? We used P. So let's make sure that this one is renamed to rotation P. And why don't we give this a save? Because we haven't saved it in a while. In fact, we haven't saved it all. Scene files. Number 1A. Dice stacking. All right. So now we've got this cloner. This is going to be our cloner piles. And let's go in at, we've already added this plane effector. So I'm going to say don't push upward. That's already doing it itself. But what I do want to do is modify clone. Yeah. So what we found out last time is modify clone is a thing, but it doesn't do anything until we give it like a set percentage, and then suddenly they're all going to jump up. And essentially, I'm not sure, there might be a way of overriding that. And if anybody knows a way of overriding that, I'd be curious. But if we have to apply some sort of value like 001, and now we said, hey, modify the clone. All of them are set to blend mode of 0 because these are all blending between each other. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and add in a new, I think we can just do a random effector this time. I'm going to make sure I have the cloner piles selected. Let's add a random effector. And what this random effector is going to do is not affect the position, but it is going to affect the modify clone. And the hope here is not quite. Do we have to do it in the plane effector? Maybe one is overriding the other. Do we go into the plane and then add a random to that? Dang it, we did this last week, I think, and we were running into a similar problem. I'm going to delete that entirely. Let's go back to the piles, and I'm going to add a random directly to it. Don't affect position, but yes, affect the clone. And if I do a 100%, is that working? A 100% modification, I feel like I'm seeing very little in the way of middle, but this goes from 0 to 100, so I'm going to just say, there we go, that's better. There we go. So there we go, that seems to work. So I'm just going to use that random to force it to randomize. So now we're doing this transition. Now I think I would like there to be more short ones. Now, I don't think we can remap via that. It's too bad. We can't remap this, but what we could do is trick it by right here. This is the cloner that's creating one die. So what I would do is make a copy of that one and then say 1 is 1 and the next one is 2. And then the 3, you know, when they get up to 11, there's not that many of them. So that's, you know, now there's only a couple of tall ones, but there's a lot more shorter ones. I'm still not feeling like that's completely random. There's some middle ones, but I don't know, I'm not feeling it too much. But in any case, I want to keep it moving. So let's go ahead and randomly grab, we're going to grab all 3 of these interior cloners, and we can add a random onto that, and we can randomly spin each of them. So I'm going to go and turn off position. Let's turn on rotation and spin each of them. Yep, just like that. That's working fine. We can spin them 360, and that's positive or negative. So now they're all randomly spun up. Although you will see this top one decided to spin randomly, which is odd. So I'm going to say make sure you're based on the effector, not based on their local space. And then, oh, those are all identical. Yeah, that's fine. And then we can go to position. If we wanted to, we could add a little bit of random motion left and right so you see the stacks aren't quite perfect. And then we should probably be naming some of these. This is the random modify clone. And this is the random pile rotation and position. And then I would probably grab this random pile, and we could probably just apply our random pile position to that as well, and that's going to randomly spin each of those and scoot them a little bit left and right potentially. So now we get all these nice random stacks all over the place. Now, one thing that's not seemingly not working. Well, I don't have an easy fix in my head. Oh, is that one? Oh, that's interesting. Like when I tell that one to rotate, some of these blocks are randomly spinning in a strange direction. I'm not sure what would cause that. Let's go ahead and just apply another random effector. Not position. Yes, rotation. Spin. Yeah, so, no. Look, even that is kind of strange. Look, see this one. Look at how that one's spinning. I tell it to spin, and it's spinning on not the correct axis. But if I set that to be based on the transform space of the effector, then that is also returning strange results. The final one would be based on the object, but I don't think that's going to be any different. We have our transform space, but I'm going to say, let's try saying absolutes based on the effector and try spinning. Huh. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure because this should be just applying directly to the cloner piles. Yeah, that's being applied directly here. So I'm not sure why they're deciding to randomly spin like that. And then there's remap. I guess we can just try all three. What was the original? Reset the default is relative, so let's try remap. And nope, that one's also, yeah, no matter what the transform space is and no matter what the transform mode is, those are randomly deciding to occasionally just do a little twirl. It's very strange to me. There's probably there might be some sort of, there might be something I'm missing there. Let me think. I mean, even having done this, even in my head right now, I'm thinking of additional cool things we could have done here. And honestly, it might be kind of fun. If should we jump to more questions, or should I keep on going a little bit further here? Because I just had an idea of a way we might be able to push this a little bit further. Although I'm not. Yeah, I think it would work. Because what we could do is change all of these to be matrix objects. In fact, there's even a tool for that. So we can select all three of these. And I'm going to change them to be a matrix instead. So all those turn into matrices. So now what we've got is a series of matrix clones all over the place. But when we had this random rotation of the pile, I'm going to get rid of that. I don't care about the rotation. In fact, we could even say we don't care about that randomness at all. So we just got a series of piles here, all based off matrix objects, all cloned all over the place. So this just becomes a giant pile of matrices all over. So now, if we make one more cloner, should have copied one of the other ones, but I didn't think of it. If we make one more cloner, and I tell this to clone onto an object, and I say the object is this cloner pile, hopefully. Is it going to do it? Oh, it's not doing it. It's not cloning onto these matrix objects, even though we're blending between them. Distribution mode. It's not acknowledging them as an object, so this cloner is not acknowledging those as an object. We're cloning matrices. Let's get rid of those as well. We're cloning matrices into a cloner, which is then blending the matrices all over the place, which is cool, but these matrices are not being acknowledged by this cloner. I set that to cloner mode. We're instancing clone onto the pile. These are just instances. These are per step. That's fine. It's not acknowledging. Vertex. The axis. Clone onto the axis. Instance. Oh. Yeah, if axis isn't working. That's working so well. Look at these. That's looking great. I like using matrices because they should be really fast. If they're not going to work, then we do have one more option, and that is I could turn them back into cloners, and they still have all the same properties. And then we can make a plane, and we can make the plane have one polygon and be really tiny, but we can just say 10, make it 10 here. And now we're going to put it inside the cloner, inside the cloner, inside the cloner. I don't know why that one decided to scroll down. Let's go there. Okay, so now those should be a series of cloners cloning single planes all over the place. And yeah, clone, clone, clone. And then this is cloning those. Those are instances, that's all fine. Wow, this is suddenly deciding to run really slow. What is so slow about this? Turn it off. Turn it off. All right. Clone those, please. Okay, now you can see we got all of our planes. That makes sense. And now that we've got all of those, I'm going to put this into a connect object. And we don't need to weld, but now it should be treating each of these as a single polygon that we can clone onto. And I can turn this cloner on. And I'm going to say I want you to clone onto an object. And it's already cloning onto the connector piles. And I can say I want to clone onto the polygon center. Not much of a difference there. It seemed to like the axis just as well. But now we've got this one thing that's creating all these individual piles, and then we've got this cloner that's actually creating all the final ones. What that means is we just got this really nice cloner, which is really cleanly set up for us to randomly give it the rotation, randomly give it the more rotation, and then potentially even give it some extra spin. So now these are all truly random stacks. So that's by far a better way of doing it. And then, so this is the new cloner piles, and now we can add one more effector on there, and this one will affect position and it will affect rotation. And I think if we spin, it's gonna be weird, but now I think if we put it onto effector that we can get the cleaner rotation. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting the nice clean rotation. So we do 360, and now each of those piles is completely random, nice and clean stacks, completely random, all set up really well. Actually, I'm quite pleased with that. And they're still hovering 100 units above the ground, which means we can turn on our original set of clones, and those are all traveling around. So there we go. Now we can hide the original plane if we want to. So now we've just got these giant stacks of die and all of this, and they're cloning onto valid surfaces. So you can see that these are, they can be off the side a little bit because we gave this random the random pile pause rotation. We're giving it this random position and potentially rotation, so you can see that those can be off the edge, but we could stop that from happening. In fact, something I often do is like, okay, I want the position to chill out on the lower angles, so we'd separate these out. I'm gonna make a copy of it, and one of them will be the position, and the other one will be the rotation. And now the position one will only affect position, and the rotation one will only affect the rotation. And in the positional one, we can go to fall off, give it a linear field, and let's make sure that our linear field is set to Z plus, maybe? Let's see. No, it's not Z plus. It's going to be Y plus or Y minus. I always mix those up, but we do that. And I turn my axis off, Alt D. We'll bring my axis back. And now as I pull this up, there we go. So now you can see that I can make it so that our first couple ones, the ones that are ground level, are not really moved. They could be really closely lined up. Or in fact, I can move it up that little bit, and now they have to be lined up, and they're going to get more and more crazy as the stacks go taller. And then, so those are fine. And then the random rotation, which we have to apply. Let's go back in here and apply it, because when we copied it, it didn't get applied. Apply that. That has full rotation. So these bottom ones can still have their full rotation, but they don't. They're not like way overshooting that little section of maze. So you can still go and travel through all of these. If we go to a nice low angle where you're traveling through, then we've got all these stacks and piles of all of our die completely and randomly rotated, and we have very nice control over the way these are all being distributed. So I'm quite pleased with that. I think that would work really well. It's all just based off of rotations. And once again, the important part of this is we built a very, I don't want to say very clean, but pile reference, but a pretty straightforward, well, I don't think that's the right thing anyway. We've made a very robust rig here, a very robust rig in which we can go back to our original layout here, go into a top view. Well, I guess we still have to visually hide it. At any given point, we can still go through and do some extra selections and clean this up. Even that, I'm just going to do a crazy spirally thing. So we do something like that, and then we can save our selection tag. And everything will update. So none of these piles of boxes will be on top of where these little paths are. And our entire pile of die have updated to not be existing in those spots. So I think that is probably pretty robust. It's a pretty good setup for us to get all this stuff placed exactly where you'd want them to go. And everything, of course, is set up on random seeds and completely random setups. This matrix object is cloning the polygon selection. But if we go to modify clone, and I go to, that's a random, so we can go to the random seed here and click on that. Every time I click this, we're going to get completely different stacks of boxes around. One thing I would have liked to have done is made it so that we could have made a curve somewhere so that these different box stacks are particular heights. And you can see there's a little bit of absurdity here, like these being stacked like that. But you can always chill out your position. These didn't have to push nearly as far. But yeah, I like that a lot. So let's go ahead and make them dynamic and explode. We could probably do that. These are pretty simple spheres. Let's see. Oh yeah, they're just cubes, and there's only 2 cloners. Like there's only 2 final cloners that are actually creating all the die. Cloner die, cloner die. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and see if we can make them dynamic. So our ground will be, I guess it's probably a good idea to make a floor, because that can't be pierced through. I'm going to say minus 50 on the floor. Why was I not on the object? Minus 50, boom. And now I'm going to make the floor invisible. We don't need to see it, but it is going to be dynamic. Simulation or rigid body. We grab both of our cloners, and we can make those dynamic. Although I tend to like putting the dynamics tag directly on the cube. So let's go ahead and say simulation rigid body. Now, I don't know what makes Sema4D acknowledge one shape or another, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell these that their collision shape is not automatic, but it's going to be box. So now it's box based, which should be a very quick simulation on them. And just based on that, we should be able to hit play. I'm going to, of course, hit save and make a number 1B for that. Let's hit play and see if it's insane. Oh, it seems fine. A couple of these, the towers are definitely not stable. And then these almost don't seem to be getting acknowledged. It's a little strange. Why it seemed like these pierced right through it? Was it because they were already pierced through it, or maybe they were turned off? I'm not sure. I'm going to grab them, and I'm going to say they do not deactivate. And let's also, just for the sake of dynamics, I guess the best way would be I'm just going to grab the 2 die models, and we're going to shrink them the tiniest little bit. So if we go to polygon mode here, I guess we have to do it one at a time. Well, if I select the polygons, I'm going to make it 99, 99, 99, hit apply, and I'll just copy it into the other one. So now those should all be a little bit smaller, just a little bit of space between them. And that's still weird. Those should be perfect. Those should be slightly above. Unless, oh yeah, the instance mode. I had to turn off the instance mode. You can't run dynamics if you've instanced it with a multi-instance, or I think even a regular instance. There we go, but that should go now. Yeah, not a horrible frame rate either. Only these 2 stacks were colliding a little bit, so those sort of exploded. But there we go. Those are all dynamic now. It's running reasonably well. So of course now we drop a giant something on it. A sphere is the obvious thing. Make it dynamic. Tell it to be automatic. Make it big. 1,000. Bah, bah, bah. And let's add a display tag. Display. I'm going to turn it into a wireframe so we can see through it. And I'll make a icosahedron. Yay! So we have our peaceful. There's just another peaceful day in Block Village, when suddenly the moon fell from the sky, and the people began panicking. No. Oh, the destruction. It's like Man of Steel. Look at that shockwave. Let's give ourselves a couple extra frames there. Like shoved them all away, all these colliding with each other. That's pretty great. Yeah. I like it. All right, what's the next question? Let's oh, bake it. I guess we can bake it. Let's see. It's gonna take a second, but yeah, we're get the next question ready. If you posted a question earlier, feel free to post it again. I'm just gonna go into cache and say bake all, and it's gonna start calculating all the way through the entire animation, so we should be able to see it a little bit faster. JM is saying we're all still children, and it's totally true when it comes to two things in cinema, which was metal balls and then dynamics. It's just like you're just gonna play. You're just going to. It's like, how can we build this and not put a dynamics tag on it? Now we did do a couple things in this workflow that I really enjoyed that I've been doing more lately, and it's something like you saw how I built these structures out of a single plane. It's like a polygon, 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 and then we could just clone something onto that surface and then do whatever we want on top of that. We didn't need it to be an existing structure, and then once we did that, we could have very clean random stacks everywhere, but still have that same parametric structure on everything. So it's just a really good combination. Crossfader, yes, the quantize is super great. Before we would have had to have used like a formula effector, and the formula effector, of course, can be a pain. You got to do all sorts of equations on it, but you just put in a random noise and then put a quantize. It's like, oh, boom, 4 different colors it's feeding through. So let's hit play. It should run a little bit better. I mean, there's still just a lot of clones. Yeah, it's actually not that much better being baked because we just have this many clones. Pretty fun. Alrighty. Swiss is saying recreate this texture and lighting combo. That is tricky. Not my specialty, but let's see what we got here. Oh, nice. So it looks like you got a photo here of a building's number. So this is building 125, and they've got these nice. I mean, honestly, it just looks like almost like some fluorescent tubes or LED strips inside of a structure made of paper or something like that. But I would guess something like paper. So it's cool. The trick is going to be, I don't know, should we? I'm tempted to try it in Redshift. I'm going to hit roadblocks really quickly. If somebody sees me doing something obviously wrong and you have a very clear answer, feel free to shout it out. But if you're just guessing, don't do it because it's just going to confuse the situation and I will ignore you. What's a good number to put in here? I don't know, say 411 because that's information. If you need to call information. And we want something, sorry, no, don't like that one. Impact, Gotham narrow black, yeah, something a little thinner. Gotham book, yeah, that one's okay. I'll give it a little thickness. I guess something with some curve would be better. What's that, something? I don't know. Let's do 42. Yeah, there we go. The best number. Let's go to the middle. And yeah, we're gonna see what we do with the Redshift. I can't be sure we're gonna do it because there's like a thin skin kind of subsurface that we want to go for. Can't be certain it's going to work, but one thing I do know that we want is a spline here, which is going to it's going to account for our tube. So let's go ahead and just spend a second and trace out semi-carefully the curve here. About the middle, over a little bit, down about there, over just a little bit, and overshoot. There you go, that looks pretty good. So we've got that. Let's go ahead and center those. In fact, those are centered, so let's move the text in. And then comes the challenging part, and that goes to, okay, if we're going to go into Redshift, the first thing we're going to do is save. Just seems like a good idea. Illumination, paper numbers. Let's see. Yeah, thin walls. That I definitely. That's the only reason I was willing to try this is some conversations we'd had recently about thin walls. Now, what I would like to do is there a light type in Redshift that point light, spotlight, area light, dome light, portal light? I guess an area light. And can you make an area light an object? There's a volume. No. How do we make it a color, unit type? No. Decay. Oh, area shape. It is going to be a mesh, I suppose. So if we have to feed it a mesh, then we have to sweep this. I didn't know if we'd have to sweep it or not. So let's go ahead and sweep this. I'm going to give this n side 8 sides, T for scale, scale it down, create a sweep, and sweep our line. Nice. And we grab our area light and feed it the sweep. And let's just make a plain floor, and we're going to add a Redshift material to that and see if it does anything already. I don't know that it will. I'm making a lot of this up as I go. Redshift material, wake up. Boom. Okay. And turn on Redshift render view. Go. Something's doing something. I should probably tell text not to. Okay, there we go. Oh, interesting. So these are light, but they're not visible. So we're seeing them in the ground, and we're seeing it very clearly in the reflection. So actually, that's promising. So if we change the intensity multiplier or the exposure, I don't have a good workflow for that, but if we increase that, then the thought here is that's going to get way brighter. Cool. Good start. Good start. It doesn't seem to be acknowledging the caps here. So if we say create single object, there we go. It does acknowledge the caps now. Can you guys hear when that little when Slack goes like does a little notification sound? Do you hear that over the stream? Because I turned off the button that says it should catch computer audio, but I don't know if that actually goes through to everybody here. So please let me know, because I got to figure that out. And seriously, the way notifications work on Windows is a nightmare. I have never, ever gotten it to work properly. But in any case, we've got this properly reflecting. Now, let's go ahead and turn on our letters, and the letters should essentially block everything, because this is trapped inside of it. There might be a little bit poking out somewhere. We'll deal with that in a moment. Let's go ahead and create a new Redshift material. Pop that open, double click it. And let's go to our Redshift output. So backlighting transparency, that seems promising. Let's go ahead and make it white and crank up that. And let's name it paper. There might be a preset for this, but let's take a second and see if I can figure it out. Let's apply that to our text. Ooh, looky that. Looky that. It's not resolving very well, but let's go to our render settings, Pause that for a second. Render settings. Control B, calling render settings. Am I doing something wrong? Why are my render settings not popping up? Oop, don't render. Why was the shortcut not popping that up? Whatever. Redshift. We could turn on, let's do a little bit of GI. Do 2 bounces. We'll go to our, where's the basic sampling? I don't even know what menu the basic sampling is. Maybe I'm just missing something. Isn't there like a minimum sample? Oh, there. Why was I completely blind? It's just under unified sampling. That's what I was looking for. Jump that up to like 64, 16. See if that does anything. All right, very bright. Now it could be, you know, we could be going too transparent here, so let's start pulling that back. Ooh, looky. Well, okay, we got a lot further, a lot quicker than I thought we would. Now we can definitely see it's poking out there, so that's just a fault of the physical geometry. Yeah, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It's just the way the spline was designed is going to do that. So if I grab that point and say chamfer, I can pull that in. Essentially, I'm rounding that corner out. So that should just fix that. Yeah, then we get to the fall off from the light. I mean, there might be settings for creating, yeah, we got inverse square, but we might be able to change certain settings there. What am I doing differently that somebody... Kiro, you're saying it'd probably be faster to bake ambient occlusion with normals and invert it. I agree. I'm trying to build it for real. I agree that that would be a better process for getting the final. But if we were building this for real, this is actually working pretty well. I guess there's probably also in the original image, there's probably some internal structure here, like a little bit of a wire skeleton. So if we wanted to push that a little bit harder, actually something else I would like to see is if we made another material. I'm going to copy that Redshift material. And let's rename it bulb. If we made that a luminant material, this light might not be necessary for one. So let's apply that directly. And I'm going to say it has, where does that live? Overall, emissive weight. So crank up an emissive weight. And emissive is black. Let's set that to white. Now it's a white material. And now there's no illumination, but I feel like that's still doing something. Yeah, actually, it totally is. So let's crank up the emissive weight. Yeah, look, so now the bulb is, it's almost like that bulb is in there a little bit more. And I feel like that's actually giving us a little bit more visibility in the way that we weren't before. There's a little bit more physicality internally on it. Now, it's entirely possible that our paper material would have some sort of index of refraction or something associated with this backlighting. Yes and no. I mean, that's just one slider right now, but there could be additional variables, but that's incredibly close. And then the last thing I was going to say was we could put some additional geometry in the MoText. If I were to make an instance of this MoText, and then we put that into the most generic way would just be making a atom array, and then putting that into the atom array, and now we get that, and now I can set the radius down to, I don't know, 0.5, sphere radius down to 0.5, so now you start getting those internal structures. Of course, they're going to be a little bit external, but if we inflate our final text, what's the best way to do that? Why don't we make a displacement? I'm going to grab our text. I'm going to tell it to be a single object. Put the inflate on it, or the the displacer and then put a solid color in it. And now, oh, that's going to change the original text, or it's going to change the atom array as well. So we actually have to change the order of operations here. I'm going to make that the original, and then we'll inflate the secondary one. We can't go too far. It's going to break really quickly, unfortunately. So if we just go a little bit, just to get it slightly outside, make another redshift material, make that one black perhaps. Color will be really dark, just a dark metal. Put that on the atom array, and then we've got our actual paper model there. There we go. So now that should be getting illuminated. Now we've got all these little cross pieces. I kind of didn't want that. I guess we could. I could lessen it by going to this degree and then increasing that. And as we go, there's going to be less and less of them traveling around. But that becomes a little bit more of the internal structure, which I think is working okay. That's going to give you that cast shadow, which is in the reference. And I guess I don't quite... yeah, I mean, for me, having no idea what the heck I'm doing, I'm quite pleased with this. Let's see if anybody has any hints. Zach is saying that it's generally preferable to use a mesh light instead of emissive material due to noise. That makes sense. Oh yeah, and the light is quite thick. That's another good point to bias. We can go and grab our N side. Let's make that skinnier. Yeah, okay, by making that light skinnier. We're going to keep it at this, well, I guess let's try turning on the emissive. Well, it's a difference between the two. Turn that off, it's just nothing. Turn the light back on. Now that is illuminated. But now because the tube is a lot thinner, we need to start making the light brighter. So we can start increasing that intensity. Yeah, that's pretty good. Although something that's interesting is that looks grainier than we had this emissive material. That looks less grainy to me, but regardless, that's not to say it's not situational, or that's could very well still be true. Crank that up. Let's see, maybe if we crank that up, they'll be very similar grain level. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think I like the way the light looked a little bit better. Yeah, it seems a little bit more distinct. But yeah, I'm actually quite pleased with that. That's further than I thought I would get. The concept seems to be there. It's casting light. That should be even there's illumination on that now, so that would cast light on the ground as well. You can see it's reflecting. The illumination is passing through. We got that little bit of structure to pop out. And then maybe it's even, I didn't do it, but potentially we could have put a little bit of, maybe this paper's not transparent at all. I don't know if we'd want it to be, but there's always a chance that we could put a little bit of transparency on there as well. Refraction or transmission, I'm real fuzzy on these. Yeah, okay, well that just straightens it up, makes it transparent, and then there's no refraction, so say 1, and then we give it that little bit of transparency. Oh, wow, it goes a long way. But then is there blurring? Oh yeah, dispersion. Does dispersion might need refraction? Oh, dispersion was the color. Is there a way of getting blurry transparency? Like there's a roughness, but how do you get the roughness to turn on? There is no roughness. Oh, you have to turn off reflection, the link to reflection, and now we have a separate roughness. There we go. That's more what I wanted. So now just a little bit of transparency, very little, and a lot of roughness. So now we're seeing through it. There's like a little bit of transparency to the paper, and now we can start seeing a hint of this internal structure a little bit more clearly, which I think is a little bit more true to what we were seeing in the image, but I don't know. I don't know that for sure. It's just what felt right a little bit there to me. It's so weird that to get to emissive weight, you have to go to overall. Very strange to me. Crank that up a little bit more. Oh wait, we went back to the light, so that's not doing anything. Put that one up to 44. Nice. All right, let's see if anybody else has anything else. Yeah, turn off the link to reflection. Set the IOR to 1. I think I did both of those things. So there's no refraction, just straight up transparency. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I just haven't played with it a lot, but a lot of it's pretty intuitive. Oh yeah, and the index of refraction is still there, so we'll turn that off. Not much of a visual difference because it's so tiny, but yeah, that should render quicker and nice and fuzzy there. We'd have to crank up some settings, make that clean up some more, but it's still chugging. Java is saying SSS might work better, and Redshift incandescent mode. I don't even have any idea what that is. Incandescent mode. But let's see. Were those some links for me from Andrew and Desilk? Were those links for me? And then while you're answering, I'm going to go ahead to our render settings, which decided to pop up this time. And let's do ×4 on the max and min, or ×5 rather. JM, you were asking about that a little earlier, so I'll hit yours up. How would you model and animate this glitchy cube? That's intriguing. That's looking fine there, though. I like the way this is looking. If somebody has, feel free to type in. Well, I'm going to look at. I can look it up as well, but I'm going to forget. How would I do this without Redshift? That's a fine question. How would I do this without Redshift? I'd be a lot more inclined to fake it. For one. Without Redshift. I'm going to click your link in a second, JM, but for right now, let me see if I can think of any way of doing this reasonably in physical. Go away, go away, go away. Goodbye. All right, we're just back to our geometry now. Well, we have all the same. We have all the same things. So let's try creating a light. I'm going to set this to an area light. We're going to go to visibility. Where's it? Details. We can change the shape to a spline. The spline is going to be that spline. Turn off that geometry. And let's turn off the text for a second. And I'm going to say the light show and render. And hit render. Oop, Redshift's still on. Back to physical. So I said that should be shown in render, but it can't show a spline in there. So let's try sweeping it. And I'm going to change this to object or spline. We'll do the sweep. The sweep. Does it not accept a sweep? Does it have to be made editable? Let's put it into a connect object. Oh, come now. Make it editable. Oh, you have to feed it a freaking raw, made editable object? That's lame. Let's render that and see if it actually renders. So now you can see, okay, now that is rendering as what in theory is supposed to be an ambient light. I'm going to undo because I don't want to lose what I had there just in case. Make that editable again. Feed it back in again. Let's make a material. Now I'm not using any of the new node-based materials. The main thing we want is on this mode text. That's the most important one. So we would use, yes, color you would turn on. I'm going to turn it off because it's irrelevant for what we're doing. Turn on luminance. No reflectance yet. Let's turn on the old backlight. Effect. Backlight. So there's a backlight material in there. Let's hit render and see if it does anything. Ew. Let's go ahead and Get this fall off angle. We got samples. Shadow. I'll give it an area shadow. Not great. Yikes. Visibility multiplier. There's no fall off parameter. Oh, there's a fall off. So I'm going to say inverse squared. That's going to super blow it out, I think. That is not giving us anything. All right, actually, not okay. I put the inverse square on, so it's just like being physical, and then we start pulling back the intensity. And now I pulled back the intensity. You can see that's starting to do a little bit of fade out on the edges as it falls away from it. But we're still getting this really horrible shadow on the edges because of the way an area light works. I think it's got like a front and back to it. So we'd have to... I don't know what parameter could fix that. Under details, we had this fall off angle, and I don't think we can go above 180. So if I start pinching it in, my assumption here would be that we're going to start getting... Oh, that's weird. I'm going to shrink just a little bit. What does that mean? Yeah. So as I start pulling this angle down, this stripe is going to get bigger and bigger. So I can't make it bigger than it is. So that's just not good. You can see we're getting a bunch of problems where like polygons are showing up in the shadow. We get this horrible stripe running down the middle. These gradient. It's starting to imply the gradient, but I don't trust it at all. So that's a big old limitation there. I'm gonna turn off the light, and this is an insane way of doing it, but we've got our light here. So let's put a material on it. Turn on luminance. Let's make it nice and bright. And then in this material, instead of using a luminance channel, why don't we use transparency? And we're going to do a bunch of blurriness. So let's say 55% blurriness. So now we should be seeing everything through it blurry. So now you can see that, yeah, now it's blurring the light bulb inside of it, which, you know, it's actually looking a little cooler than I thought it would. But, so we're blurring the light bulb inside of it. But we need everything else to show up. So it probably means we're too transparent. So we can start pulling back on our... Oh, yeah. So we pull back on our transparency. Maybe turn on the luminance channel. Just straight up luminance. And as it becomes transparent, it's becoming luminant. So this becomes our, like, little push and pull slider. As we pull this up, we're getting less luminance. And it's just a little bit luminant everywhere. And then we're seeing through this blur. So now let's start pushing our blur up higher. Yeah, we can start getting up to something like that, which is something. I mean, it doesn't look horribly unlike it. We can turn the color channel back on again, and now that should give us a little bit of surfaciness to it, a little bit of highlights that can be hitting it. The same goes for reflectance, turning that on. You know, so, yeah, I mean, yeah, we're actually, you know, we are seeing the stuff underneath it a little bit, shadow. Yeah, there is no shadow here because it's just this illumination, but you know it's a fake of it. It's working-ish with blurriness. Of course, blurriness is like the worst property. But once again, if you go back and you look at our reference here, it does feel like there's quite a bit of blurriness. We are seeing the internal structure there to a surprising degree. You can see there's a pretty solid tube in there. I feel like you can even see like a little darkness here, where there's probably like some sort of support structure right there. But yeah, I mean, if that's the goal, then this is not horribly off from that, and just picking numbers that, you know, are going to appropriately show that. But once again, as someone had said, you could probably do some sort of ambient occlusion on it. Let's go ahead and save this again, just for the final thing on it. We can go and put a new material on this, and there is the inverse ambient occlusion, which I don't play with much. Well, let's see if it does anything. If we put on ambient occlusion, it's going to be, you know, just like the same old ambient occlusion we're used to. Why are we still seeing through it? Did I put the wrong material? No, it's the right one. That one's not rendering. Oh, but that's that's the internal tube. This is the one we want. We just don't want that there. My mistake. I knew I was doing something wrong. Okay, ambient occlusion. Okay, so here's boring old ambient occlusion, and now we can go to this invert direction, and let's see. Yeah, this inverted direction ambient occlusion is a kind of just a one-click solution. It's not perfect, but you can see it's doing the effect pretty well. I know, we got. I don't know if ray length ends up having any effect. Well, apparently it has a huge effect. 22. Yeah, so this inverted ambient occlusion is giving us something like it. The part I'm not understanding is I feel like we're getting. Does inverted ambient occlusion, does it mean it's looking inside the object? So now we're seeing the shadow from these internals? Maybe I never understood what inverted ambient occlusion meant. But yeah, that's working surprisingly well. And I mean, you could probably even do a combination of the two, which would maybe be the best of both worlds. Dispersion. What does that mean? Whoa. Well, that's kind of cool. It's almost like a Sketch and Toony look. In a new way I had never tinkered with. But yeah, this maximum ray length seems to be dramatically changed the way that these internals are going to look. So that seems to like really blur it out. So combining two of them, where you might have one where it's a lot sharper, and then one where it's a little bit lighter, and doing some combination of two might work pretty well. Yeah, it's ray traced back. Well, I mean, you just say ray traced backwards, but I always thought that meant. Is it just the same as inverting the normals? Because that just mean it's just. I guess you can just invert the normals because it's only going to be on the other surface, but that's still interesting to me. Yeah, it was cool. So I'll save that as another version. Okay, next question. That's enough 42. JM, curious about how I would model and animate this glitchy cube. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, look at that. Neat. Lots of cool experiments here. Who made this? I like it. Alex, first off, punch, Tamagotchi, wax, floats, batteries, etc. S5. All right, what do we got? What do we got? Well, first of all, I mean, there's two different things going on. Is that description? Project doing childhood impression, punch cards, Tamagotchi. Okay. I mean, it's really cute looking. The cool, intriguing looking part are these shapes here. But what I'm a little confused at, potentially confused, is there a surface to these, or is there just the walls? And the other problem is, and this doesn't say it was created in. The problem is that we don't have any parametric way of getting subdivisions. Parametric way of getting subdivisions that are still square like this, that I kind of have a fall off of some sort, not outside of code. Especially not animated. Although actually looking at it, those don't animate. Those are static. Everything on top of it's moving. So I guess if those aren't moving, that opens up certain possibilities for us. I'm trying to make a cube, and let's see. It did look like I had quite a few subdivisions no matter what. So we could do 5 by 5 by 5, make it editable. And then probably just select a bunch of. And even this, what I'd probably do is a huge disconnect. So we'd say U-Shift-D, the shortcut, pop open. Oh, that's subdivide. Disconnect. U-Shift-D. U-Shift-D. Oh, okay, I must have hit the wrong button. If I turn off preserved groups, it's going to actually explode all these into individual objects, or segments, rather. So every single one of these is its own little subdivision. So I'm just kind of randomly select a bunch of these, and then we can say subdivide, which should be US, and then we can say UD, and it's going to deselect, and then we can deselect some of those. And then let's just do it from this angle, and then I'm going to hit US, and then we can deselect a bunch again. And then hit UD, US. And yeah, you can see how I'm slowly subdividing all these a little bit more and a little more randomly. UD for separate, each segment, and US for create subdivisions. And we just keep subdividing more and more. And you can now see that we've got a pretty cool looking little subdivision pattern. And then, so there's no, in Cinema 4D right now, there's no parametric way of doing this. Now, we could have potentially divided this up into some sort of giant greeble pattern, like where we build a series of different subdivision plates, because technically all these will eventually equal one of these. So it's like we could have made that random one and that random one and that random one and a bunch of different random ones and plastered them all over the place and then randomly rotated and whatnot. But that's only going to get you so far. It's not going to be... you can't make infinite combinations. Like I just kind of randomly erase things out, and we got more of an interesting looking pattern. Now, having said that, can we get those little extrudy walls a little bit more parametrically? Potentially. What comes to mind is, I guess we could bevel, but I'm also, bevel might be a good idea. But then you can get the MoExtrude can get interesting in this type of scenario, where see those all get extruded outward, and I can say I want what do I want? I want one segment to push out 25 units, don't scale at all, but then I can put a second one. Oh wait, yeah, we have to make a selection. That's what I knew. There's a trick. If we make a selection tag, then now we can say, hey, everything's limited to this selection tag. So now this MoExtrude is told, hey, only apply that selection tag. If we make a second MoExtrude, it doesn't, if we don't have this selection tag, I'll show you. If I clear that out, I think we're going to see like this explosion of points everywhere. So the older points can extrude outward as well. But if we keep on limiting it to the original polygon selection, then you can see that it just extruded. It's almost like a second extrude on what was already there. But now we can do the second MoExtrude, and instead of doing a Z25, we can say I want this to go 0.99, 0.99, 0.99. Hopefully that works. And now if I zoom up, you can see, look, we get this nice little internal bevel. And now we do another MoExtrude. I'm going to grab the first one, and that will be the third. And now you see it's going to extrude out. But I'm going to say go negative 25. And now it should push back in. And now you get a nice thin-walled version of all these. And it's sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. But you can see that the bigger the block, then the smaller the extrusion, or the bigger the extrusion, and these tiny ones have a much thinner wall. So in this particular style, I think that might be a good thing, but in a lot of others, they might not be. Now we can go and grab this and say, I don't know, x divided by 5, just do like a tiny little version of the effect. So now I'm just extruding them all out a little bit less. Potentially we could have pushed them internally as well, but I think that looks pretty cool. So that's one thought, is like, okay, that's the way the geometry is. It's just kind of extruded out like that. The other would just be that they're all extruded, and they each have a wall, and the vertical walls are textured differently than the top wall, and I just don't know which of those. I don't know which one of those it would be. And I don't know. I don't even want to push this too much further. The overall effect and render they made was really quite lovely. So if I were to like make another cube that can reference the original 555, and we make a cube here, and I guess we divide this by 5, which is 40. So we make a cube that's 40 by 40 by 40. We'll probably change the height right away. 11 on Y, cloner, clone that onto an object. The object will be this cube. It will clone onto polygon centers. Looks like I guessed wrong. 40, it's probably Z. So there we go, they're all on Z. So you get that kind of thing. Let's go a little bit further than 11 so that it actually covers it up. And now you get that effect. And then if you want to, you can just take it up a little bit bigger so they intersect just a little bit. And then we take this and then we just start controlling it via noises. We can say, create a plane effector. The plane effector is going to, actually it's just going to affect the visibility, just like we were doing before. Let's go to a fall off. Let's give it a random field, and now they're randomly disappearing, but I can go and change the field to a not be random, but be noise-based. And let's make sure our noise is big enough that we can actually start seeing emerging patterns. It's a little bit hard to tell sometimes, but let's give it some animation speed. 55, hit play, and start scaling up this noise. Yeah, so now you can definitely see that a little bit more uniformity on that noise as it's traveling around, putting different blocks in different spots. If we think there's too many or not enough of them, we could always go into the remapping, and we can expose the contour. I like doing contour curve because now if we were to pause at any given moment, I could grab the one side of the curve and start pulling it in and making it be less, or I could grab the other side of the curve and have there start being more of it. So it's whichever we like the look of it, maybe a little less in this particular instance. And then we can, that's one plane doing one thing with one type of cloner, but if we wanted, we could copy, I think, the entire rig, copy and paste. But then on this plane, I'm going to grab that random effector, and we could invert it there, but inside the plane, why don't we say, hey, I want you to invert the result of that noise, and it should give us literally the perfect opposite of it. But if I go and affect this fall off a little bit more, yeah, by pulling that in, then now there should be a second series of rectangles that are perfectly inverse of what we had. I don't think any of those will be doubling up. None of these are repeats. So it's kind of like color, please. Yeah, so we got these. These are both doing the same pattern, but just like inverses of each other. So that can that could travel around and do that, and slowly just be revealing that underneath. It's pretty cool. So yeah, outside of texturing those up, and yeah, like I said, it would just be some sort of blurry plasticky material. Yeah, and there's probably different Greebly type plugins to create these kind of patterns, but that's doing it from scratch there. So I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to do with that one. We'll jump on to another question. We can fit at least one more in. Probably more. Glitchy cube. Eric, how do you create this impossible triangle simulation technique? Uh-oh, I have a feeling we might have seen this one before. We saw something similar to this. Is it, this is from Mark Francher. Mark Francher FX. Let's see. Last time we had a lot of trouble forcing the perspective, and then just the way this is all simulated, it's pretty tricky. I'm not even sure exactly what we're seeing here, but something that's interesting is that particles, the idea of this being particles does open up the idea of doing some possibilities, because we don't actually have to have things behave like gravity that much. Let me think. I'm trying to think if there's a very, very simple version of this we can do. The basic idea being, imagine if let's just do one polygon, 100 by 100. All right, so if we had one polygon here, I'm going to copy and paste it. Let's move it up, I don't know, 200. It's kind of arbitrary. So now, if something was, like falling through this hole, it could fall into that. And then we just do some perspective tricks, and then even that, like, okay, so this, yeah, let's do, so we're not going to spend much time on this, but if I made this editable, make this bottom one editable, come on, letter C. Grab an edge, hit the letter D for extrude, and I start extruding out something right around there. I'm going to eyeball it, and then I do it again. It should be about square, And I grab this and hit D for extrude and extrude that. My aim was a little off. Extrude like that. And then the perspective will probably make it a little bit smaller. And we didn't turn on a parallel camera either, but we can still, in theory, give this perspective. So we do something like that, and I would pull this further over. So we can pretend that's not there. So now you can see how this is, you kind of got this overall, it's kind of that same perspective, but keep in mind that's completely flat. But then it turns into, and it's tilting out the side, so then you could make it so that this entire thing gets tapered upward somehow. We'd probably need the parallel camera, but you could, this is the fake, this is going to be the really, really bad version of it. I'm not even going to push it too far, but the idea would be you could pull that up and then pull this up and then actually make there be some geometry traveling upward. We'd have to be tricking the perspective to be constant, and I'm not grabbing all the points, I'm just grabbing a couple chunks. But we pushed all these up properly and scaled them and stretched them to be matching the actual geometry here. I'm trying to squint, and it's like this kind of thing should be a little bit straighter there, and that should be a little bit further that way. So if we kind of tweaked and forced all these lines to be tricking the perspective a little bit, then it could actually be traveling upward. And then that means that when it gets over here, we could make a series of wind. We can make, like, if it was X particles, we could have gravity pushing it down, but a wind blowing it upward, and then when it gets up to the hole, it could actually fall properly, essentially, by treating gravity one way on the upward flow, and then gravity a different way for the downward waterfall. That is all the time I'm going to spend on that, especially with it being a liquid simulation. It's crazy. And last time we tried to do it with a parallax camera and matching them, and it's like the concept's there, but it just turned into this very specific mechanical repetition. And I don't think it's very interesting for a live stream because you have to get really nitty gritty with a perfect perspective and whatnot. And there's not really fun techniques there. It's just a lot of like, oop, tweak, oop, rotate, oop, get that right. Oh yeah, and lasered, and asking for the mixing is of course crazy. There's I think there's maybe some stuff with X particles you could potentially do, but definitely not a live stream type of question. Andrew, Instagram. What do we got? Ambiclusion. Nice name. This is looks like all right, what do we got? Kinetic sculpture setup, visuals. Oh, that's, what do we got here? It's not even rendered. It's cool though. It's okay, so it's constantly, it's kind of doing a sine wave thing, but then it can drop down to become some sort of imagery. Hyundai 2018. You can just morph between things. I'm trying to think if there's any relatively quick methodology we can do here. Honestly, I can't really think of a really quick methodology. This feels like it'd be a fairly manual type of thing. Like my thought here is, let's see. It goes to, let's do it with some matrices. I'm gonna make a matrix object, and let's go 40 by 10 is perfectly fine. And then, is there any, I don't ever do the sine wave stuff. We could do a formula or something. Formula. So that's happening. Let's have it not affect scale. Position on X. Whoa, that's not exactly what I was expecting. I guess it's only one orientation. We'd have to change the formula to be facing a different orientation. Honestly, that's super arbitrary. I don't care about the formula. It's not an important detail here. So why don't we just make a shader effector? Actually, no. Well, I mean, yeah, everything's a plane object now. So we'll do a plane object on Y with a fall off that is a shader field. And the shader field can be fed a noise, and the noise can be nice and big, and that can be traveling in a direction. There we go. So you get something like that. So not the perfect sine wave, but there you go. You see the pattern. But now what my thought is that's like, okay, that's one layout, and then you start choosing a series of different patterns you want to emerge. So the idea would be we can make a second matrix, and this one don't apply anything to it. And honestly, I don't even think we'd want it to be it could be a matrix, but instead of it being a matrix, let's transform it into a cloner. And we'll go back to the thing I had been doing earlier. Let's make a plane, and I can make it, I'm not sure how big those are. Let's say 1111 with, oh no, that's one polygon with a width of 1111. All right, slightly oversized, those are 10 by 10. I'm actually gonna go 9 by 9. So there we go, we get something like that. So what, all I'm thinking is you would do something like this, make it editable, and now we have all these different planes. In fact, I don't even want to do that. I want to put that into a connect object, make that editable, and now we have a single object. So you would pick your final camera angle, whatever that would be. So you get like a bunch of heavy perspective, whatever it is, and it's super arbitrary. You don't know what it's going to be. Or like make sure you pick it. It has to be specific. But then you just make your final pattern here manually. I'm trying to think of something that would be somewhat interesting, but the point being, or you know, we could potentially deform them into position. I'm trying to think, but it's just it would just be taking all of these and making sure you're only moving them up and down. So I don't have a specific pattern I'm aiming for here, but if I were to have grabbed all these and you just start laying them out however you want them, whatever this final pattern would be, manually making that shape. So if you wanted this to fall off, this could be little stairs. And you could even sculpt them potentially. I'm going to hit MI for magnet tool, and I'm going to turn off everything except for Y. And yeah, there. See, we could click the middle mouse button, and now we are even sculpting. We'd want to keep all these. You got to keep in mind the only thing that matters here is the polygon center. So all these little curves and everything, those aren't really going to help with much. But getting all this little curvature going, whatever this shape is, so that's arbitrary. Like I said, I don't have a pattern in mind here. You could go and write out text. You could do whatever you want. You know, even these could just be whatever. Keep some little waves in it if we wanted to. So then we, I guess what I would probably do is make another matrix and tell that matrix to clone onto an object. The object will be the connect. I'm going to clone onto polygon centers. And don't worry about alignment. I don't care about that. So now you can see that we can hide that reference here. And then we've got this matrix object that's just doing whatever that one told it to. So now we got one position and another. So we can have this one matrix doing its thing where it's kind of doing this fun little animation. I'm going to hide the second one. But I think if we took this matrix and I feed it a inheritance, and we feed, okay, so that's being fed inheritance, and then in the inheritance effector, which is affecting our wavy one, I'm going to drop our, let's just do custom shape. So in the inheritance, I'm going to drag our custom shape, and I'm going to say morph motion object, and that should automatically force it into that new position. But what that means is I could go and create something like a linear fall off, and or whatever your pattern is, we can see, we can be like, oh look, we got all this fun waviness, and then as this comes through, it's like pattern, and then pattern, and it's, you know, at that point it's pretty much as simple as that. It's if you do a series of matrix objects which are pretty light on the calculation, you can just kind of morph anything you want between them. So now I've got a box. This box one, I can make it taller and wider. I think that's sort of working. So yeah, now this one, you know, it could be the wave, and then it comes through and becomes a new shape. But still got a little bit of that waviness because it's got a big old fall off. I could do that. There we go. Now it's full. So now it comes in, and as it continues, it can just fade away again into that original shape. And you do those transitions. Go ahead and just keyframe that. You do a little something like that. We hide the box fall off, let that shape do its thing, and now you see it looks really clunky, but then you go and you take your first matrix object, and you just make sure you are running a delay after everything else. And now right away, right now it's set to blend, so you can see it's a lot smoother. We can crank that up a little bit more. Now you can see it smoothly transitions between them. So right there, pretty cool. Or you can turn on spring. Brink, brink, and then of course you could do two of them, like blend them and spring them, so it's smoothly going in and springing. You can just see how we could start feeding this a series of different matrices to do whatever heck pattern we want up top, and then make those patterns down below. I don't know if that's how they made it, but this is a very solid process for creating that effect. Morph patterns. Yeah. Look at it go. But that was really, I mean, it's really neat. There's something kind of mesmerizing about it, because these strings that are above it, I mean, I know at this point these are just clone, you know, you can clone a sphere with a string above it, like not even dynamic in any way, and you just let those start doing its thing, and then you start doing those transitions between, and there's something like really mesmerizing about the way, I mean, there's even that little fun like bump in the middle there. I'm not entirely sure specifically what he did there, but it just goes to, actually no, I can think of a way that even that, if we were to go into our, we're delaying it here, but in our fall off, if we were to do a contour of the fall off in such a way where we get like a middle point like that, so you get this little shelf technique. So it's like flat, flat, flat. So we might even get that little, yeah, okay, well, it's happening a little quick. I'm going to emphasize it to be on the lower point. It was still up in the silhouette. Yeah, see, now you see, get that double effect. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Ba-dum, ba-dum. A little bit more of a transition, we might see it. Ba-da-dum, 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 ba-da-dum. So yeah, so even that could be introduced really quickly into this technique. Yeah. Pretty cool, though. I like it. Who was that again? Ambiclusion? Ambiclusion. Very cool. Back to the chat. We got 10 minutes at least. Johnny, how about this one? You think it's Fields and Volume Builder, but how? Thanks, Leo. I hope I will have a good 2 weeks. Ooh, we got crazy orange and some goo made by Yippee Hey. Blob, 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 blob. Yeah, definitely. Definitely Fields. Definitely volumes. In some ways, it's a combination of it's been fun today. Is almost every question kind of comes through. Every question today has almost built off the idea of the previous one. So that little bit's fun. Even here, the idea, it's like, okay, we got some seed, orange peel, orange, and then there's even a transparent layer inside of there. I feel like we're having a little bit of trouble with volumes doing some things like this, but let's see what we can do. We can go straight to a volume builder for one, and then we feed it a field. So we go into the create menu, field. We're going to do a shader field instead of a random. Shaders are slower, but we have more direct control. So we feed it a shader field. In the volume builder, we click on the shader field. And right now the box is set to, the shape is set to box. In the shader field, let's give it a noise. And instantly we should see something. So yeah, there we go. And let's go ahead and make it 1,000. And there we go. Clearly see that we've got some noise pattern in there. So now we can change its shape. We can say it can be an object. Or now it's looking for the object. But we might even be able to get the shader field to limit. But yeah, I think the best idea is just to make a sphere. And in the sphere, we can go into our volume builder, put the sphere. And now we say the shader field should be based off the object. And now you can see it's limited to wherever that was. We can visibly, actually I'm not entirely sure it's even true. It's limited to the shape, but it's on top of it. So if I put that on top, so creation object, subtract from it. I knew intersect. Even the spheres doesn't seem to be a full volume. Let me think for a moment. Because this just seems to be a thin skin on the outside. There's like a thickness to it. I think we might have to turn on fog for that to work. Fog's a little harder to visualize. And now, yeah, set to object is a little harder to visualize. Volume builder. Yeah, okay, well, it's working better anyway. Yeah, it's we're turning on fog mode, so it's actually seeing all the internals. Now we can see this resolution. If we go to, did I put builder inside of builder? That's fun. I want a builder inside of, I didn't know you could do that, builder inside of a builder. Builder inside of a mesher. Bloop, there we go. So that's what we're seeing, but then you see it's more of a proper volume now. And we can start decreasing our voxel size so we get more of a resolution. And of course, at the end, we'd want to do a big old smooth layer to really chill it out. But we can remember that those take a little while to calculate. So I don't want to go overboard on those. But yeah, we can do something like that. All right, so we've got that. But then it starts turning into... Can you put more than one builder in a mesher? I don't know. Let's see. Builder in a mesher. That's a second shader field. And the shader field... Aren't we supposed to... I feel like I'm missing a detail here. Because we're not able to use all of our cool field modifier layers with this technique. By putting the shader field inside of it the way that I am. Because, yeah, we can reshape layers, and that's fun, but there's no, like, inversion here. Unless we're going to combine them. My brain is just not giving me the results I'm looking for right now. Let's multiply and intersect. I mean, we could invert the noise, but that's a very manual thing. I don't want to do it that way. We could just swap these, and now we've got the opposite noise. If we crop it in properly, then you can see we got that. I mean, I can't imagine that's actually what the technique is. It's gotta be more to it than that. Animation speed at play. Tell the shader fields to look at the frame. So these can actually calculate through. Already it looks like something... Oh, yeah, they're still intersecting in some not quite perfect ways. Tim Clapham has some really good stuff here. My brain is just not giving me it's just not quite giving me the proper detail. Like, what is the combination here? I really want to use the power of fields because honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the like the fields layout is smooth is better. I like the way the fields are laid out with inversions and whatnot more than what the volume is here. And it's even making me want to drive this via like a matrix because if we were feeding this into a matrix, it'd be a lot easier. Yeah, Paul, we're remapping one noise on different intervals. Well, even that would be like putting this into a color shader and then doing different stripes of it. That's not very visual. But putting this in a matrix object to visualize it would be kind of clunky as well. Like what I really want here is a series of fields. Is there a field, like a group field? There is a group field. Maybe that's what I'm missing. I want a group field. Yeah. Let's put this into a group field. Let me see. Maybe that's the part I was missing because I felt like there's something I definitely didn't have. If I put the shader field into a group field and I put the group field into the builder field, I have to drag it in to actually be a child. Well, it's there. Don't worry about color. Don't worry about direction. And I put that into the builder. Group field. Don't worry about that. Normal mode. Don't be based off the box. Be based off the object. There we go. Okay, so there we go. I think that's what I was missing. Was I was like, I should be able to use layers, but I can't. So by putting that into the group field, and I like having it be a child because it's just visually a little bit clearer. But now we have the ability of remapping things. So I could, here I could say invert, and we should get the opposite. Sort of. It's an odd kind of opposite. Shader field. This is a little, I want more of it to go away. Yeah, something a little bit more like that. But then when I turn on invert, I would expect almost the perfect inversion, but it could be, I guess it had to be the perfect inversion and remapped a little bit. Once again, remapping this way is so much easier. If I got rid of that invert and instead we feed it a curve, I really love this curve. Now we can be remapping that by pulling this curve in and out. You can make less or more. If we want to invert it, it's as simple as essentially grabbing those two lines and flipping them opposite. So it's the same thing, but we have all of the possible combinations. So that starts making a lot more sense to me. So then I think we could start building up multiple group fields, and they could both be being fed the same shader field. So it doesn't actually have to be a child. It just has to be dragged in as one. So this curve, we could flip it. Which is giving us a cute little cube because this shape wasn't told to limit itself to the object. But we can't just say object because it's clipping to the sphere. So can we limit it to being a full box, but it internally is being limited to a sphere? Possibly. If we, it's a volume. This is a field volume. So if I were to create a brand new spherical field. Let's do this step by step. If we do don't need the sphere, don't need a smooth layer. We have a spherical curve. Just set that to normal. In the volume builder box. So there we go. It's set to be generating a box of 200 by 200 by 200. There we go. This is starting to feel a little more intuitive to me. So now it's just filling up this volume, but now we're controlling everything with fields. We don't have to worry about those little sub-shapes that are really going to mess things up. So now that becomes a sphere, and now we can start combining these in more interesting ways. So by multiplying that, this shape is trapped within that sphere. So now, if that is the case, then now it's pretty easy to duplicate that group field, and this group field we can go in here and invert that, flip that horizontally, and now we should get our opposite pattern, and that's set to normal. Can that go back to signed distance? Yeah, we might be able to go back to signed distance. Unless Fog seemed to calculate faster, though. Why is, I guess that's already the inversion. Flip horizontal. There we go. So that's just supposed to be like these tiny little things. And then this one was supposed to be a brand new one. That one should be flipped. Yes, no? Volume builder, turn it on. And it looks like we're going to have to keep on setting any duplicate group up to 200, 200, 200. But now these should be essentially the same shape twice. But that means we need to start cropping one of these sides in. We should start getting the gap in between them. Oh my. Apparently not. Oh man, this is proving a little more difficult. And we might need to make this additive. And increase the resolution. Well, we've gotten to a completely field-based workflow now. But except for this adding mode, I'm not even, I don't play with fog that often, so the results we're getting out from this is not super intuitive to me. And we can also keep in mind that maybe I'm messing it up because maybe I should have been copy and pasting our entire rig. So when we're into our group and we invert this, we're actually going to see two different meshes. So those become two different meshes, and now, there we go. Now when I start cropping out, now we can actually visually see them. Before, when they were being treated as the same mesh, they were merging into each other, and I couldn't see the result. So we need to make sure we have enough separation here, but that is just the control here. And we probably, yeah, actually, now that I think about it, we probably don't even want these little, we don't want this big transition in between them. I'm actually learning a lot right now. Click on this curve. That would be, we don't want these big transitions because it's giving us all this fuzzy wiggle room. So if we do start making them more defined, then they should start having to have these really hard edges. And now they're really matching each other. There we go. Now we're starting to get something. So we need the entire rig to be copied. And we'd have to do that anyway because we need them to have different materials. So now these can be referencing practically identical things. Like we've just got the shader field, and the shader field, we can change a single number here. Change that to like 500, so now we get double, kind of the double of the noise. We get this more complex pattern, but still just a shader field, so we could do something like put that into a colorizer. And the colorizer, actually, yeah, it's a shader field, but yeah, we can put it into a colorizer, go to black, to white, back to black again, and now we kind of get a loop around, which can give you some fun patterns. If we were to go up a layer here, maybe if we pinch these in, yeah, you can see now. You see we get these little lines, and one's the inverse of the other. So there we go. Look at these. These are some more interesting patterns that we can start going through, and yeah, they're really sharply on top of each other. So all that wiggle room we were giving it was what was creating the problem. So that was a little more challenging than I thought it would be. But yeah, now we got the setup, and that makes a lot of sense now. The bigger the voxel or the smaller the voxel size, the better, sharper that will be, but we can always put smoothing on after the fact. Very nice. And each of these is now just one group field, and the group field gives us a lot of control over the way these shapes are formed. Even this outer one, so you get this nice blob, but I I can grab that spherical field and we could increase its radius. And look, those blobs can go a little bit further out from the surface. So they're still going to be open and we can still see through them and make that blob, but it's bigger than the interior one. And it's so much cleaner, so much more intuitive, like so much better of an artistic control to be able to grab that and move it in or out here, to affect it. But it's not going to change the way the noise is working. Now we can have that more internal one. And that is just working really well. Like even that, I like this, but let's go ahead and shrink it back in. And then just for fun, let's copy and paste the mesh again. And this is where it just starts going, where you can start layering and layering things up on top of each other. Go and make another material. Let's apply that to this one. And now this one, we have a spherical field, and we could increase that range so it gets bigger. And we'll go back inside here, and let's invert that again. And this could be mapped significantly differently, however we want to. But my thought here is we have our spherical field, but the spherical field, we could put that into a group, and then that could get a curve. And that curve could curve upward and then downward. So now we have an interior and an exterior of it, and that should probably be pretty sharp. So let's sharpen those up. And now, yeah, now we have just this one thin layer of sphere. So we're kind of just capturing that little layer of this fall off. And now we can, just by changing our radius here, determine where this little outer shell is going to live. So we just have this little extra candy coating on top of whatever section we want. That could be like that, or it could be going back to this curve. We can flip that back around again. And now we can be covering the rest of it, but in a smaller way. Yeah, look how, oh man, look how nice and controllable this is. So now we have this kind of like this cloud layer that's on top of everything. And it's just this little thin shell. So we peek right through and we can see all these other layers. And oh, it even creates those nice little sharp ones on top of it. Man, that's looking great. The surface here we're getting is pretty good. We can always grab our volume builder. I mean, if we decrease this, it's going to become sharper. Some of these little spikes aren't working so well, but it goes back to I'm not, I guess fogs don't have all of these additional settings. That's a sign distance field. It's a little sharp, but that could be to do with the blobbiness, or it could just be that we need to put in some smoothing deformers now. Smooth. Yeah, wow. Okay, smooth goes a freaking long way. I think smooth might run quicker on a sign distance field as well. So we do that. Let's see. It's not fast, but it's not super slow. Let's see. Yeah, I mean that works. That works well. We could still shrink it in, or shrink it, or make it bigger. Go to this one. Actually, the bottom one's the one I want. Let's put some smoothing on there. Chill that one out. Yeah. I guess you have to go pretty far to make it smooth, but now we can counter by increasing our range. Blobbing it up. Blobbing up. Pretty neat. And yeah, just start layering all those different ones up. There's so many different ways those noises can be combined, but just keeping in mind the way that those are merging and blending should give you all of the opportunities to put different materials on there, chop them off, have them fade out. That's really it's pretty cool. There's so many different combinations. Thanks for the question, because it's just it's an aspect I haven't tinkered around that much, and it's kind of good to wrap my head around that again. I knew you could do it, and I knew there was a field-based workflow, and there we go. We did find it. Just took a few minutes. Yeah, that should wrap this one up, actually. Let's give that a quick save. We didn't save it the whole time. A little dangerous. And let me just recap a couple of things, and we will go. That'll be number 5A, volume blobs. So, some quick recaps. First of all, today is a Chicago C4D meetup in Chicago. So if you're in Chicago, hopefully I'll get to see you. If not, then we've got half-res announcements are going to be happening very soon, which should be very cool. I'm excited for that, so you can keep an eye out. If you haven't already gone to halfres.com, make sure you do go to halfres.com and sign up so when tickets go on sale, you'll get a notification because we are going to sell out. We sold out last year and we're the same venue, so I imagine we'll sell out and possibly even quicker. So if you're planning on that, make sure you get signed up on the newsletter so you get notified. On top of that, I'm not going to be here next week. Next week I'm on vacation, so keep an eye for that. No post. I have that brand new tutorial. Make sure you go check out that tutorial. And then I want to make sure I do a special shout out here for the super supporters on a Patreon. So we have Burst FX, who's been helping out recently. And of course, we have the Great Wanderer Studios, who is the Among the Stars supporter, which is awesome. Thank you so much for the support there. And thank you so much, everyone else, for doing support on Patreon. It really helps me do these live streams. It helps keep this stuff going, makes it so I can make more tutorials. So all of that is, it really makes it easier for this to keep on going. I'm going to go ahead and click on this cute little animation. There we go. Should be good. I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll probably be pretty much in blackout mode all of next week, so you won't see too much of me. But definitely go check out that tutorial. Thank you everybody here for asking all the questions. I could not do it without those questions. It's really important to me that everybody shows up and we get to figure these things out together and get the little challenges and have everybody learn along the way. It should be, it's good stuff. I really enjoy it. So thanks again, everybody. I will see you around on the Slack channel. Make sure you join to the Slack channel on rocketlassoslack.com for the new challenge that just came up, the Sci-Fi Helmet Challenge. So that should be really cool. And I'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye, 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 bye.